Okay, good morning. This is Cheng-I from the University of Maryland. Very exciting to have so much information provided this morning, and I myself learned a lot. And the first is we want to ask the audience if they have any questions they would like to discuss. Now, I do have one or two questions. Now, it seems we should use AI to connect all the different factors for the plant productions. And, we talk about the CO2 content, the photosynthesis, we talk about the relative water activities, soil content, and also the plant varieties and different cultural conditions, and also LED light. So in order to produce the maximum beneficial effects, it seems, we need to choose the best combined conditions for the plant productions. Do any one of you have some comments on that? John, how about you start first?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I agree. I mean, AI has a lot of application, especially you heard some discussion of phenotyping. What we need is frankly, we need data. We need to see how the plant changes as you change all these variables individually, so we get a better sense and then of the impact on plant growth, and then the impact when they're changed in combination. So there's a tremendous amount of opportunity there. It's just we need a lot more data. That's my perspective.
I would echo that and say that data is our limitation at the moment in terms of AI and machine learning application into vertical farming systems. And in order to be able to better optimize our growing protocols, we do need to be able to make sure that we've got more data available for the sector.
Yeah, I personally think that we can also use maximally for the past research outcome as well, because there are tremendous research have done in the previous in the past 50 years in this field. And so there are different approach, I guess. So there are some parts that we need to use AI, but there are other topics that we don't need to use AI to get some results. So I guess that we can, I think that it will speed up, but also there are a lot of things that we can still do using the past research outcome.
Yeah, I agree with all of you. I think another thing we needed to emphasize is the engineering aspects that really needed to be advanced. For example, alternative energy source, how could we control the environment? Even though it's indoor farm, it's possible to control, but still need a lot of energy. And since we are using electrical lights or artificial light, and that's going to produce a lot of heat. And in hot regions, we really need a lot of cost to run the HC. So that's one part of the engineering part, and the other part we needed to think about the circularity. How could we use the waste produced from plant factory and also the associated things? And for example, we needed to come up with the clean water, our water, for example, I mean, reverse osmosis water. Then what about the other wastewater? The circularity things needed to be considered at the beginning to be sustainable for indoor vertical farm.
In terms of that, the agricultural waste, it seems all the plants are grow so well and look so nice and even look delicious. Okay, and so it seems to me we don't have much of the leaf waste. The water is a different issues. So what do you guys think?
If I may sort of chime in here, I think it's not leaves that we need to be sort of worried about in terms of our waste streams within vertical farming production. It's the roots and the substrate.
That's right.
That does make up an awful lot of the biomass that we are using, or that we have and we're producing. And we do need to consider how those are used in alternative processing streams. So, for example, a vertical future, we only ever use a biodegradable or compostable plant-based substrate. And that means that we can consider our waste going into green waste streams and processing streams. So that can go into composting, it can go into anaerobic digestion, it can go into pyrolysis, for example, where further benefits can be obtained from what would otherwise be considered as a waste. So I think waste needs to be kind of rethought in this sense. Added value can be found. It doesn't need to be a cost associated with food production. It can also be a revenue generator itself.
No,
But I agree with you, Dr. Wei. You know, if you go to Salinas and they're harvesting romaine lettuce, they're disposing of about a third of the leaves that they're pulling off and leaving on the ground behind because they're dirty. However, in a greenhouse production or vertical production, they're harvesting that outer third of leaves and using those for chopped bags that you see in Costco, for instance, and then separating those from the hearts and romaine. So the actual plant waste has gone down dramatically. I think, you know, people need to acknowledge that a benefit of the greenhouse production is that you capture that third that you may have thrown away in the field before. So there's a benefit of that. But I agree, roots, people don't appreciate how big a root system there is in the trough below the plants. And that's the enormous amount of biomass that needs to be disposed of.
Yeah, of course, for leafy green, yes, we are really achieving very high percentage of the harvestable component. We also needed to think about the other crops. Certainly we needed to think about outside of the leafy greens, those crops. We also needed to think about the fruiting vegetables. And in that case, the harvestable component is not so high. So we still have the green waste needed to consider about. And I really agree with the substrate part. And for those crops, we needed to use substrate probably more efficiently since they are longer term and they are more suitable to be grown in a substrate format. So imagine peppers, miniature paper, dwarf tomatoes and peppers, and those crops will be added. And of course, Dr. Hayashi mentioned about strawberry, and strawberry is one of the most economical and promising crops for indoor farming.
Yeah, technically indoor environment, even the rice or wheat can be grown. It's just a matter of the energy consumptions of each crops have a different requirement for the light to grow. So it's just a matter of the economy of the productivity if you want to do business. So there are actually the biopharmaceutical produce using the rice crops, for example. So it just depends on the purpose.
I agree with that. You know, the first speaker talked about how AeroFarms was struggling to be financially solvent. And a lot of times the comparisons are it's producing lettuce 2,000 kilometers away. But the real competition in many cases, the reason why an aeroponics is suffering is because they're competing with someone who's within 100 kilometers. That's a greenhouse plus lighting facility. And so it changes the economics tremendously when you can use natural light, particularly in certain parts of the world where electrical costs are going up, in part because there's more EVs and more electrical use. So I see the vertical farming being especially useful for pharmaceutical industry or very high value crops. Driscoll's is looking specifically at doing very unique strawberries only in controlled environment ag, whereas all their major production is still going to stay in the field.
I also noticed that, well, anyway, I was the one John was talking about. The AeroFarm financial struggling. Another reason, I think, because they have to figure out everything by themselves. They have to develop, they do all the INT for the past 19 years. That is, I think, of course, very big burden. They, of course, have a good investment. And then at this environmental, this economic environment, they could not survive, or facing, they are still existing, but they are restructuring their company. And they certainly, I think that as a university, we needed to do a lot of INDs, and this innovative farm business really needed multidisciplinarily, not just, I am a horticulturist, so not only plant physiology, we really need all kinds of engineering aspects. And there are many, I collaborated with different engineer scientists, and I feel like, we, just like people from engineer side, they will think, okay, I wanted to have collaborated with somebody who knows plant science. And they thought that as a plant scientist, we are capable of everything from genomics to horticultural cultural information, but it's not. And the same thing for the engineering aspect. There are sensing technologies, there's mechanical engineering, and there's electronic engineering, and of course AI. And this is also a new word, a new field for the engineering people. For example, there's a lot of advancement in precision farming. Precision farming to them is like AI oriented, but since there are so many people in that area, so now our new colleagues, they are coming to indoor vertical farm or control the environment. They think that there's a lot to do for them, and I really agree. So we would need many more scientists like those engineer scientists to work with us, and with horticulturists, with breeders, and with also the pest management. Even though it's very clean, but not like Japan, or the plant factory are so clean. But here in the US, there are a lot of not so advanced indoor farm industries. We also needed to help them to get developed. So a lot of things we really needed to, work together.
How the concept of this vertical agriculture can be applied to the space shuttle business?
Well, that's another different word, really. That the environment, depending on spaceship, or you're talking about Mars, so the environment would be totally different. I heard about that, but I'm more wanted to help down to the earth first. Then probably some people probably working on those NASA projects.
But that's one of the component in the whole picture of the closed environment production. So I think there are many common technology that can be applicable. So many are working on that. So yeah, we just need to have more researcher and work together. So I would suggest the company people to talk more to the university researcher so that to use maximum outcome that they have done in the past field, so not to start from the beginning scratch.
So NASA currently is evaluating grants for growing in a substrate, which is essentially space soil. So they're looking at this point at growing on the moon or in Mars. Prior to that, they were looking at using aeroponic type systems, right? Because free floating water in space is a problem, right? But an aeroponic system is less of a problem. So it seems like they're moving towards, they're actually quite far ahead, because they're already looking at growing on Mars and the moon in the existing substrates. All the proposals that they've accepted have to be growing in that type of substrate that would be common on either those, in one case a planet, in one place a moon. I would come back to what was just said about engineering. we don't think about it, but a major problem in greenhouse or in vertical farming is dehumidification, and reducing humidity takes energy, and you need to get that humidity out of that facility, because otherwise you get botrytis on leafy greens. It's a problem. So there is a great need for engineering in these systems.
Now, from
with
the
regards to sort of using, oh, sorry, you carry on.
go ahead. Go ahead.
I would say we've got in doing Vertical Future, we're involved in a project which is funded by the Australian Research Council, and that's called Plants for Space. And it's not just about the growing methods, what you're growing, and using plants as biofactories for pharmaceuticals and for other products that would otherwise cost an awful lot of money to get into space. Sort of biopharmaceuticals, protein therapies, flavors, and just using the crops as a route to providing a more varied and textured diet as well. There's a lot of data out there that shows that astronauts surviving on like a meal replacement and sort of essentially powdered food, they suffer both mentally and physically, despite the fact that they're receiving a complete nutrition. And so it's not just about the completeness of the nutrition when we're looking at sort of the protein, the carbohydrate content. We're also looking at texture and flavor, and that has an incredibly important aspect. And so that's the sort of research that we're involved in within sort of focused on space exploration as well.
Thank you. I like that idea to have the small scale of the vertical agriculture in the house. That's it's not really for the consumptions, but for some of the mental health for the individual living in the house, for the kids to learn something and stimulate their interest in some of the science. And for some adults, because of the growing of the plants, and then eventually you can consume it, that can be good for the mental health issues. Then of course, you need the space, you need to have certain kind of the financial capability to do that. I don't know what you guys think about this.
At my prior institution, they were combining a greenhouse greens facility with an apartment building, whereby we don't think about this, but humans give off CO2 and plants consume CO2 and give off oxygen. So they're using the adjacent greenhouse facility as air purification and CO2 enhancement. So it's a different kind of concept where you try to include both facilities together and exchange air.
Yeah, in Japan, they are actually the hospital installing the plant factory system to cure the health of the mental health of the patients. And it actually works because the plant grows, and then just by looking at how plant grows really nicely, they give you encouragement. So that might help to the human, and then also for the just citizens. There are even 10 years ago there are some exhibition that to introduce into the technology. For example, there are different spectrum box that they each have a plant, like a red box and green box and a blue box, and then showing how plants respond differently. And the kids in the city comes and take notes and then see the plant grows and then share their how they think. And so those kind of things can just encourage the education. So you just can plant factory or CEA technology can be used for the educational tool.
It seems the industry is doing well. I mean, from Eri's presentation shows so many different companies, and I always think about the price of the products and how the consumers, whether they can afford it or not. And of course, the variety is always limitations to certain kind of vegetables. And, you know, we talk about the regular growth environment for vegetables and the price, and also the salary for the workers. So do you still think this vertical agriculture will flourish in the future?
Yeah, so this is just the starting point of the industry. So I think that 30 or 50 years ago, it was the same for the greenhouse industry. So of course, since this the beginning of the industry, there are good company, and not everyone is, you know, making profit, unfortunately. But some doing good is making profit actually. But of course, there are issues. For example, rising electric energy prices that will suffer, the farmer will suffer. But good one is doing good. And then comparing the price of the produce on the average, I think the plant factory produce in Japan is 20% higher than the conventional leafy lettuce, for example. But actually, the price of the conventional farm is fluctuating, so by the season or the weather. So sometimes the plant factory produce is cheaper, and then also if you consider the post-harvest produce, for example, the food service for the washing 3 times and dry and checking the bugs, and then so considering those post-harvest produce process, the plant factory cost is almost the same as a leafy green in Japan. But it's a consistent supply, so many company or food company is wanting to use the plant factory because it's a consistent produce and then quality and then the quantity.
Yes, that's the beauty of that. Yeah. John, you have any comments?
Yeah, even in our area, and Dr. Wei works at the same university I do. If you go down to the Whole Foods near the university, they've been out of lettuce a couple of times because of weather events. And so, you know, there's this inconsistent product coming from California that's an issue. But I'll come back to it. Depends what you're growing and where you're growing it. Does a vertical factory make sense in Saudi Arabia? Absolutely. It makes complete sense to grow in Saudi Arabia. Does a vertical factory make sense outside of the University of Maryland? Less so, because you can drive 5 to 10 miles and have open farmland, and you can build a greenhouse there and use some supplemental lighting and produce lettuce much cheaper than California, but also cheaper than a vertical farm in Washington, D.C. So, but for high value crops like the phytopharmaceuticals or specialty strawberries, vertical farming has a definite place in those areas.
Okay, thank you. I think our time is up, and thank you both. Yeah, good talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you very
Bye.
much.
Yeah.
Thank you again for the invitation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cheng-I and all the panelists for the wonderful and enriching discussion.